Well, welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Pearson. I am the assistant conductor for the Symphony of Northwest Arkansas, and I am here today with Jerod Tate. Jerod is his piece, Chokfi, is going to be on our upcoming last concert, our season finale. And I would love for you to just Jerod, if you want to introduce yourself in your native language. He asked if he could do that, and I was like, by all means, so I don't mess it up.
All right. Well, Chukma, Chin Chukmata, Sahol Chifoat, Jerod Talo Ikbi Impecha Chaha Tate, Chikashasaya, Impecha Chaha, Chokat Michashawi Iksa Ishtown Chololili, Talo Ikbili, Hashlaka Asayopa, Chukmashki, Yakoke. Hi, everyone. My name is Jerod Impecha Chaha Tate. I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation here in Oklahoma, and I am a professional classical composer. And I'm very, very happy to be here. I really love getting on Zooms and talking with folks. This is fun for me.
Well, we are so excited to be able to have you and for our patrons and people to be able to get to know you better. And selfishly, myself, I am too. I think that's just so exciting to be able to meet new people and
Yeah.
just kind of get inside of your head a little bit about what you do and where you hail from and all of that. So
Mhm.
to get started today, can we ask you to tell us a little bit about how you got started into music? Obviously, you're
Yeah.
a composer and classically trained, but
Mhm.
maybe it didn't always start that way, but maybe just kind
Mhm.
of give us like a brief, like how that happened for you.
Absolutely. Well, it all started with my parents. My father, Charles, is Chickasaw Indian from Oklahoma, and dad professionally is a tribal judge and lawyer and special district judge. And he's also author to our current Chickasaw Constitution. Every tribe in the United States has our own constitutions that run in tandem with the US Constitution, and my father was author to ours. And so, but also my father is an incredibly classically trained pianist and baritone. So I started piano with my father. He played repertoire and sang repertoire in the house. In fact, dad also played accordion, and he used to gig accordion singing arias in restaurants when he was in high school. And so that's a really cool image to see this Chickasaw kid singing Italian on an accordion. Only in America, right?
How
So
did he get started? I'm just really curious
well,
about
my grandmother just really well, her parents both played as well. I mean, these are all Chickasaw people.
wow.
And this was very, very common. Oklahoma has a really, really beautiful and robust history. We have 39 federally recognized tribes here in the state. And also the tribes that when we migrated from the southeastern part of the United States in the 1830s, we had already been integrating with Scotch and Irish for a few hundred years. So we had adopted lots of European customs, including classical training. And so lots of my family dating back a couple hundred years were classically trained. Even though we were totally traditional, we spoke two languages. We were basically bicultural people for many, many centuries, as we are now. So we just had access to all that, and I have classical training in my Chickasaw family background. And so my grandmother just insisted that the kids all took piano lessons and vocal lessons, and it really stuck with my dad. And so that's how I started with the piano. My mother, Patricia, was from Nebraska, and she was Manx Irish. So I am Manx and Chickasaw. And my mother was a professional choreographer and dancer. And my parents met at the University of Oklahoma, I'm sorry, in Enid, Oklahoma, at Phillips University. And then they both graduated OU school from here in Oklahoma. And my mother was a professional choreographer and dancer, and I grew up in all kinds of modern dance and theater rehearsals. I was very much a theater brat when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so I was just completely saturated in fine arts. And of course, being from Oklahoma, I was exposed to many, many different cultures within Indian country. So lots of traditional tribal music and classical music and American modern theater. So like a lot of my heroes from the past were American choreographers like Martha Graham and Isadora
Very nice.
Duncan.
That was one of
Yeah,
them.
Ruth St. Dennis, Ted Shawn, Agnes DeMille, and of course, later on, I knew Jerome Robbins and Bob Fosse and Alvin Ailey's choreography. So I grew up with a lot of that modern dance and theater, and a lot of that also accompanied modern music. So I was very aware of Moog synthesizer music in the 70s because it was being choreographed too. But anyway, and also since my mom choreographed all the major ballets, I grew up with Stravinsky and Prokofiev and
Okay, that
Ravel
was
and Dvorak in my mind, and so I grew up literally with the finest orchestrations in classical history in the ballets that I was raised around. And so I was very, very saturated with both American Indian and modern American classical culture.
amazing. I love that.
Mhm.
You have a taste of like a lot of what I have. Like the last 10 years I've been immersed in like musical theater. Like even this week I'm conducting Mamma Mia here in town on in
Yeah.
between my
Yeah.
stuff everywhere. And then, I've done a lot of stuff with like dance troops and stuff, like modern dance, like putting it with like some of the classicals and the moderns. And it's so fun to work with
Yeah. Yeah.
dancers.
Well, as a pianist, I've been really fortunate because it's taken me to I was a ballet accompanist for the Colorado Ballet for many years, and also a teacher there. I taught their history class for all the dancers, the music history class,
Right.
and then also I toured. I did the Broadway national tours of Miss Saigon and Les Miserables. And when I was in Denver, when I did live in Denver, I played all the. I was the local keyboardist that played the second keyboard for all the touring companies. So it was very natural for me to play all of that, and I'm very, very fortunate that I had all this beautiful national experience with that as well. I'll tell you, I just feel very, very fortunate about all of those experiences, and I bring a lot of that into my music. I will say very clearly that my music is very theatric and dramatic,
Oh yeah.
and orchestrationally colorful, and that's because I was very influenced by all of that.
Yeah, just even in studying your scores and preparing, I was like, oh my gosh, this looks like something from Copeland's, like Appalachian Springs or, yeah, Stravinsky. So I love that you're talking about that because I'm like, aha, that's where that's coming from. You were
Yep.
talking about Les Mis. That was my very first musical 10 years ago. 6 weeks before the show, I got a call. The conductor got sick and they were like, we need you to conduct this show. So in 48 hours, I stayed up all night and I
Mhm.
learned that score. I had
Mhm.
2 books. We weighed them. It was like 20 pounds. So
Mhm.
I know as a musician, you're like, that's a hefty thing to travel. So that's really cool. So
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
I'll back out. But I just thought that's so cool.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about Chokfi a little bit?
Yeah, we can, but and then we can come back to some of these other questions. This is just
Sure.
kind of like all the things since we're right here talking about it. So I'll let
Mhm.
you. I want to steal all your secrets because I thought it was so fascinating how you came up with this.
Mhm. Well, so this is I guess is a good kind of segue from what we're talking about. So, I'm very influenced by lots of modern composers from around the world, and that is because lots of composers historically infused their ethnic and national identity into their music. I mean, Tchaikovsky is a really good example. I mean, you can't be more Russian in your sound than Tchaikovsky. And if you look at Debussy, that's super, super French music. And of course, Bartok was a very, very important person in my development because he was really the first ethnomusicologist of his own people, where he was transcribing his own folk music and incorporating that into his classical compositions. And I mean, that really changed the world when he did it so clearly and so deliberately. And so I'm very inspired by that, and that's what I do in Indian country is I will transcribe melodies, and use those as a foundation for all the music that I compose. So all of my music is based in North American Indian culture. Chokfi happens to be it has two major elements. One is that it's like a kind of a rhapsodic tone poem about our trickster animal, the rabbit, which is Chokfi. And so many tribes have trickster characters. So another common trickster for the plains is coyote. For the Pacific Northwest, it's raven, and for Southeast Indians, it's rabbit. And so I was asked to compose a work for our Oklahoma youth orchestras here in Oklahoma City. And I thought, I wanted like a fun character like that has all kinds of diabolical qualities and darts around and everything.
Right?
And so I thought about that for the kids. But then also I thought, I was feeling very pedagogical. So I wanted to create a work that had all kinds of personality and colors and string techniques that were used to teach kids, but very encapsulated. And fortunately, I got to conduct the premiere, and so I actually got to coach them. So it was very much a teaching tool for that. So I had a lot of fun with that. Melodically, I focused on a tune I learned that was sung by a friend of mine named Curtis Scott, who is a Muskogee Creek hymn singer, and we have an entire repertoire of church hymns within Indian country that are sung in our own language. And this particular tune, I just happen to like that he has sung in the past. And so this is very much in homage to my friend Curtis. And so, but the beginning, again, it's like I was mixing the melody with that whole darting around of the rabbit. And so I created this very divergent multimeter beginning, and the melody comes in with a low second violins, which is kind of like a high baritone, low tenor part, like Curtis would sing. And so that's what I did. So I've abstracted it and put it into multimeters, because it's usually a little slower and more smooth. But then it does come back in inversion as a romantic section in the middle of the work, is kind of the climax for the piece. So all of these elements are working in my mind as I'm creating new works. And so you can see where all those influences are.
Yeah.
Of course, I got this wealth of beautiful, beautiful folk music from Indian country. And then I've got all these great influences of modern artists, modern musicians. But then also there are just a huge trove of modern American Indian artists and all the other fine arts. So like, for instance, our national poet laureate for the third time in a row is Joy Harjo, who's Muskogee Creek from Oklahoma. And she creates all this modern poetry that has all kinds of beautiful imagery that harkens into her identity as a Muskogee Creek person. And so there's a whole ethos and color that she has, very influential to me. There's all kinds of visual artists in Indian country that do the same thing. We take icons from our tribes and from Indian country, and we abstract those into modern paintings. Same thing. In film, we've got Sterling Harjo, who's Muskogee Creek, is a friend of mine, and he is producing Reservation Dogs. That's a total modern expression of being an American Indian within a very, very modern medium of film. And actually, film is not Aboriginal to anywhere in the world. That's totally modern for all people.
Oh, yeah.
So, and of course, it's being saturated by people from all walks of life and ethnic heritages and experiences all over the world. So I just feel like I'm part of a big kind of party of creativity, and we have so much creativity in Indian country, and I just feel like I'm just part of this beautiful scene.
Yeah, it's almost like you're leading the charge, because I think American composer, I think Arthur Farewell, he was helping to bring out various pieces of work, but he's not a true Native American that I read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, that was observational, and that was, so the American Indianists were very much hobbyists, and that is they were looking at American Indian culture and reacting to that for sure. But at this point in the classical world, we now have quite an explosion of American Indian artists, performers, and composers, and conductors, and it's really, really a fun time for me because there's so many people coming up into this genre, and I'm really enjoying this. In fact, I'm about to premiere a new opera next fall
Wow.
entitled Shell Shaker, which is sung entirely in the Chickasaw language. And the three main leads are all American Indian opera singers. So Mark Billy is a Choctaw singer, Kirsten Kunkel's Muskogee Creek, and Caitlin Morton is Cherokee. And so I've got an opera sung in my language that's being sung by Native opera singers themselves. And so that's just really, really cool. It doesn't mean that the opera is exclusively performed by Native performers, but it's just really nice to be able to show off to the world.
Sure.
We have all of these musicians available and that are in the arena and on the world stage. So I'm having a really great time at this time in my life.
I love that. And the title of our concert that we're playing your work on is called Evoking Folklore. And I love that you're so passionate about your people, and that you don't want that to die out, and to be able to give them a voice and put it to pen to paper,
Mhm.
and to even have an opera that highlights that. I love that. And then that we're highlighting that. If you could speak to maybe someone that's inspired you, or we talked about like your process and your the typical music that you create, but is there someone along the way that inspired you? I know maybe you mentioned early on, your musical background, how you got to be here, but is there someone like even currently that inspires you musically?
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Well, I will say, there was a composer named Dr. Lewis Ballard, who's Quapaw Cherokee from Oklahoma, and Lewis passed away in 2007. And fortunately, I was able to become friends with him. But he's kind of like a grandfather of American Indian classical composition, and he had a very, very similar passion of focusing on our folk music and orchestrating and representing that in modern composition and with classical instruments. And so he was a very, very important figure for us, and a very, very big inspiration. In fact, my parents went to the premiere of his ballet entitled The Four Moons, that featured four of our five very famous American Indian ballerinas from Oklahoma. And so he was just really a part of that development and that fabric of American Indians in the modern performing arts. So Lewis was a really, really important figure and very, very inspiring for me. And I just, it's just really cool that my parents knew him and I knew him. And I feel like I have a mission to continue this legacy
Yeah.
and an obligation really in many, many ways. And I will say, my dad is a really, really big inspiration for me because dad has just given me so much of my pillar knowledge. I mean, my dad gave me a really beautiful and robust understanding of American Indian history and law, which really resonates very strongly with me. My identity is very, very strong and solid because of my father. And also, the fact that he was such an incredible classical musician is, I think about it all the time. And, my dad and I speak Indian law and politics and opera in the same sentences to this day.
That's so
And,
cool.
so my dad is really a really, really important person in my life.
He has to be so proud of you too. Does he still sing?
Yes, he does. In fact, my sister is getting married this summer, and so my father and I are performing. I'll be playing the
Oh,
piano. He's singing at her wedding.
that's amazing. Now your mom, is she still active and dancing?
Well, my mother passed away
Oh, I'm
17
so
years ago.
sorry.
Oh, that's okay. But my mother, I'll tell you, it's every single day. It's like it's just becomes clearer and stronger. All the things that my mom taught me about how to be a professional artist. Mom was quite amazing. She was called the Grant Queen when she was at the University of Wyoming. She taught university level for 30 years, but she always created new ballets and did new productions and involved the community. And she was always funding her own projects. And so she actually commissioned my very first work, a ballet score, and that's how I began composing. So my mother's influence on me is just absolutely just it's grassroots, really. And I mean, she's the one that asked me to compose. She was doing a new ballet based on American Indian stories from the Northern Plains and Rockies out in Wyoming. And she just turned to me and she's like, well, you're my Chickasaw pianist kid. You can write the ballet score.
I
And
love
I actually told her no. I was like, it really knocked me over just the idea because, you think about all these, I'm talking about all these artists that influenced me now. Well, I didn't know if I could live up to that, or, I didn't have any idea if I could really do that. But in a very beautiful and innocent way, my mother was asking me to be all of who I am at the exact same time, a
she's
classically
always
trained
be at
American
the time.
Indian artist.
Yeah.
And that's, that was it. So my mother and I were very, very close. And I grew up in theater productions, in rehearsals. I sang, I played in the pit, I ran sound and lights and did makeup, and I did everything under the sun in theater with my mother. And so that resonates very, very strongly with me today.
I love that. And she saw and spoke into you what you didn't see at your young age that
Mhm.
would change the trajectory of where you are today.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. Yep, that was life changing.
yes.
Mhm.
So what is this is kind of off subject, but not really because this
Okay.
is part of who we are, right?
Yeah.
What is a random talent that you have or a hobby that nobody knows about or that our patrons wouldn't know about?
Oh, sure. I am a very passionate fan of astrophysics
All right.
and SpaceX. So I talked to my son and I'm like, Aloha, it's very possible you could go to Mars. Like he is of that generation, he could actually travel to Mars. He was asking, well, Zick, Dad, do you want to go? I said, absolutely, I will be right there. In my 70s, I will travel to Mars with my son. So I watch YouTube videos about space travel and astrophysics constantly. And I just absolutely love space exploration. A very good friend of mine is John Harrington, and he is a Chickasaw astronaut. And he went up on the space shuttle, and so I always call John about all the new developments about space travel. And so the whole Artemis mission to me was just absolutely phenomenal. I'm just we're about a week away from Starship launching, and I'm just on pins and needles. And I actually time my compositions to what's going on in the development of space. I'm like, you know what? By the time they do this, I want to have this work done or this
That's amazing.
movement done. I use that as inspiration because I love the passion and energy that goes into space travel because there's a whole community of people that come in for one purpose and it
Right.
unifies them in a beautiful and creative and peaceful way. I really am inspired by that because that's how I feel about what I do as an artist. I'm creating art that is for the world to
Mm.
feel and to interpret and make their own. And I feel a very big kinship to space travel and astrophysics.
That's so cool. Who knew, right? That's really so have you written like a piece like dedicated to like space Is that on your bucket
Um,
list?
well, in fact, a recent commission from the Apollo Chamber Players in Houston was a work called Moonstrike, and they called me for a new work that was in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Apollo missions of our moon landing. And so Apollo Chamber Players asked me if I could compose a work that was based on moon legends from Indian country. I said, by all means, we have so many moon stories, it's ridiculous. But the whole world, all folk traditions have moon stories because, of course, the moon is very, very important to us.
Yeah.
And there's so many legends about the moon. And so I created a new work for narrator and string quartet in which 3 major American Indian stories of the moon are told with the string quartet. And in fact, John Harrington, our Chickasaw astronaut, was the narrator for that. He's the narrator on the recording. So you can find that on Spotify and all the streaming stuff. It's called Moonstrike. And so that was my first opportunity to compose a work about space and celebrating the moon landing.
I think that's so cool. And
Yeah.
I have to run every day, like really early, because I teach during the day and I get up at 4 a.m. and run. So the other morning, the moon was so bright. And that just made me think of that. It was just like,
Mhm.
I didn't even need my headlamp for running.
Yeah, yeah.
So what is the most trouble that you've ever gotten in? Maybe growing up with like your parents? Is this, since she's not here, to hear what you actually did?
The most I remember very distinctly in first grade, I was in the corner a lot. And in fact, it was my cousin Amy and I were in the same first grade class, and my Aunt Connie actually kind of blew the whistle to my mom, and she's like, every time I pick up Amy, Jared's in the corner. And so, but I remember the one time that it came to a fore because I would get my homework done early, and I would talk to everybody. I'm a really big talker, but I remember one time for some reason I stood up on the table, and this isn't like one of those modules. We had a modular for our first grade class. I stood up on the table and I did the loudest Tarzan call known to man. And yeah, so I was in the corner like all day. Yeah. In fact, I had to take a disciplinary class for an entire semester because of my behavior.
You were
Yep,
just
that was me in first grade. My brain was just all over the place. It was really hard for me to focus at that time in my life for some reason.
Your creative side was coming out early on.
I'm sure. I mean, I guess if I want to make myself feel a lot better, I'll say I was so creative that I did Tarzan calls. So, but yeah, that was the most trouble I got in. Actually, it was a consistent trouble that I got in. I was constantly in the corner in first grade.
That's wonderful. So fun. So if you could change anything about the industry, or you're already doing so much, I mean, making a headway for Native American composers and music
Mhm.
that's not often heard, but what would you change, or how would you continue to encourage those
Mhm.
of us that are not as familiar with Native American music, how we can help support that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess on 2 fronts. One is, I mean, it's just honestly, it's really nice to have this opportunity to have conversations with folks like you and to spread knowledge about Indian country because, America is Indian country
Yeah.
and our Constitution is very influenced by the Iroquois Confederacy. I mean, Benjamin Franklin came and said, I've got how we're going to seal this up, with our Constitution. I mean, it was a really, really important contribution to how strong our democracy is in this country. I'm very, very proud of that. And we were all very democratic in our tribal systems all over North America. And so, I mean, just stuff like that, just general, Native history is something that I really encourage people to learn and to learn about tribes that are local to them. And one thing that's really, really helpful is that we live in an age in which every tribe has our own websites. And so anybody who wants to learn about their local tribes can get on the web and go right to websites and learn about history, language, and culture. There's phone numbers to contact. There's activities that go on with ceremonies and dances that are open to the public. There's a lot that's available. And so I really enjoy spreading just that mindset of like, oh, this is available. I can learn about Indian country that's, just right in my, right next door to me. And so we're all neighbors, which is really, really nice. And so I like that opportunity to talk about that. And I encourage folks to take their own initiative. Just like if I had to do any kind of research on Cambodia, I'm not Cambodian, but if what I would do is I would get on the web and find maybe Cambodian cultural centers local to me and make phone calls and go to events and, that kind of a thing. That's the mindset that I would have if I was doing research about cultures that I didn't understand or had little knowledge about. And I encourage everybody to have the same open mindset and joyful mindset about that. And then I guess the other thing that I would love to be able to spread more is this knowledge of artists as entrepreneurs. In fact, all people in the world are entrepreneurs. We're all trying to make a living, feed our families, feed ourselves, they pay bills. I mean, this is a total human thing that we all share. And and I like that because we're all monolithic in that sense. We all have that same issue of living, making a living and making things work in our lives. And so I like to talk to artists and musicians about seeing themselves having a portfolio lifestyle and there's this stream of income, there's this stream of income because my talent as a pianist and composer, well, I can conduct, I can compose, I can teach the piano, I can perform in ensembles, and of course this is something in European history. This happened all the time back in Mozart's day. Everybody did all of this, and so I like encouraging and artists to embrace that entrepreneurship and seeing that this is very, very possible to make a living. And it takes you just apply your same creative mindset to your actual, thumbtacks of how to make a living every single day. It's the same discipline and it's the same creativity that can be applied.
I love that. It's just so cool. And I'm actually finishing teaching up about the Renaissance period here with my high schoolers. And we were just talking about that today. We today, our internet and the world at our fingertips is like it was for them during that time period when Gutenberg printed the first book on the printing press.
Absolutely.
We have the world at our fingertips to find out more information on how best to support all the entrepreneurs. And I agree. If that's the sky's the limit for sure.
Yeah, it really, really is. We have lots of opportunity. And so I think focusing on silver linings and opportunity, and having a positive mindset, is, and also a mindset of gratitude, look for the things that we have. And when you look at the basics that we have that we can build on, it's really helpful to all of us to have that mindset of gratitude for what we have.
Exactly. Well, as we're wrapping up today, Jerod, what's next for you? I can see there's lots of music behind you, so I'm sure you're busy composing or preparing.
Yeah, I am finishing up the opera Shell Shaker right now, and then I also dive into. I've got 2 string quartets in the next season. I'm writing a new orchestral work for City Music Cleveland that's coming up very soon. I've got another commission for the Oklahoma City Philharmonic coming up, a violin and trombone concerto coming up as well. And so there's lots of pieces that I've got on my plate, lots of chamber works as well. And so I just need to clone myself and then double the time of day.
Yeah, I understand. Not near as busy as you, but pretty busy. And so
I don't know about that. I think we're all busy, but I will say lots of folks that are, kind of parents in their middle age and just around that time, we're all like really, really busy and really, really tired. And I think it's just this time of our lives. It's just kind of normal. So I'm just kind of like, this is normal to not have sleep.
Right. And we just have to be intentional to have that downtime. Yeah.
Well, I totally agree. But I do count my blessings. I'm very fortunate and I'm very busy and very blessed. And so I keep that mindset. And the fact that I'm my son's father is something that's it really means the world to me and keeps everything in focus and all my perspective in line.
Yeah, I 180, 200% agree. Well, we are so excited to be able to feature you and your work on our season finale. And thank you so much for taking time to share with us about your journey and your music and your creative process. I feel like I thought I had researched and knew a lot before I talked to you today. And now I'm like, wow, so much more. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, well, Jerod, thank you again. And to all of our patrons, we can't wait to see you at our season finale concert. And thank you again, Jerod. And I want to encourage everyone, if you go to our Inside of the Music on our webpage, you can go to Jerod's website. I have a link to that and several of his works. And so that way you can kind of dig some more, just like he was saying, how that you can help support the arts and specifically supporting Native American music and composers. So again, thank you, Jerod and everyone, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Chukmashki, Yakoke.